Hi everyone, welcome to my studio. Diane here, and today we're going to paint some magnolias, seeing as they are actually out now, being as it's supposed to be spring. And here's my quick sketch that I just did to try out some colours, and I suggest that's a good idea, good way to start, so that you can decide on your palette and your composition. Having done this, I've decided I'm going to do a landscape direction, that's to say wider than high, and I'm going to move these around a bit, but this gave me an idea as to whether or not my colours were right. So I've settled on a very restricted palette, as I always do, a limited palette, and the colours I'm going to be using will be, in order to achieve the pinks, we're going to go for Potter's Pink mixed with quinacridone rose. In this particular case, this is an Old Holland colour, Scheveningen Rose Deep. That is quinacridone rose deep. And I'm using Old Holland at the moment, and I'm finding them a very nice option. So a little bit hard to get if you're in America, but I think if you're in England you can get them from Jackson's and places like that. And that is going to be added to Potter's Pink so that we can soften it up, because a rose pink is too bright on its own. And then for the little, the buds and the highlights, I'm going to use quinacridone gold, which is a very good colour for nature. And then the stems of the roses are going to be magnolias are going to be brown. But I'm not going to use a brown, I'm going to mix a brown from sap green and Scheveningen Rose Deep. So any pink and any green will create a brown for you, and that's better than using a neat brown colour like burnt sienna or burnt umber or whatever. It's better if you're going to be doing flowers, because it harmonises much better. And you don't need a brown. So there we are, quinacridone gold, quinacridone pink, Potter's Pink and sap green. So let's get started with the composition. Now these flowers are better painted loose. I should mention I'm going to be using round brushes. This is a number 7 rounds synthetic. This is a number 11. Anything smallish and biggish will give you what you need. And I'm just moved my brush support out of the way. I put my paints in these little dishes because I find that works really well. And for mixing, and if I need to blend a colour, I just use this little dish and I just mix on there when I'm doing flowers. Okay, so rules of composition for painting florals. You want one flower obviously to be larger than the rest, and you want that to not be smack bang in the middle. You want it to be using the rule of thirds, probably a third of the way up and a third of the way across at some point. So maybe we'll start with our first magnolia blossom here. And I'm just drawing these very roughly. They're not going to be botanical in any way, shape or form. Probably best to concentrate on having an uneven number of petals. I don't know off the top of my head how many petals magnolias have, but I'm going to say they've probably got either 5 or 7. So we're going to have one big petal and 2 slightly smaller ones, and then the stem is going to come out here, and we'll just indicate where that's going to go. And bearing in mind this is just a demonstration, this isn't a carefully thought out painting, something I'm going to hang on the wall necessarily, but I'm just going to show you here my method for doing loose watercolour flowers. So I've taken the little stem out here to the left and put another flower in there, and tried to make it face a different direction from the first one. And then we could have another stem coming up here, and maybe we'll make the flower face down and have it not quite so wide as that one and a bit smaller. And then, well, you could carry on developing that, but for the sake of a demonstration, probably 3 flowers is enough. And we'll see how that looks once we've finished it, but maybe we'll just put one over here coming down from off scene, so to speak, sort of off stage. Okay, I don't know if we'll paint that one or not. Okay, so Having done that, I'm going to start by wetting the first flower, and we'll start with the big one. So I wet the 3 leaves, the 3 petals. You can tell I haven't had my coffee yet this morning. We'll wet the 3 petals quite generously, and then we're going to drop in some pink. I'm going to take a tiny dab of the rose. I'm going to mix it into my potter's pink and make sure I've got plenty of water in there, dilute it down, try it out on my palette, and then I'm going to just tip the board like that, and I'm going to put the paint in and let it run. And I'm going to then add a little bit more here so that it runs a little bit more. And then we're going to let that settle. I don't think that's right, that's a bit too dark there, but so just encourage it out to the ends of the petals a little bit if you want. And this is where you can make it bigger if you want. I think, oh, that's not big enough. So that's the first step. And then the next one, we'll do that maybe a tiny bit of quinacridone gold in there, and we'll brush those colours in like that. I'm actually going to add a little bit of quinacridone to this one too, because I feel it needs it. So we let that move, and then I'm going to wet this one, and I think we will do this one, but we'll do that one really pale. So tilting the board again and just dropping the colour in, letting it flow. And the same up there. Okay, so now we have to wait patiently for that to move around a bit and to dry out a bit, and then we'll come back in and do the stems. Okay, so that's dry now. So I'm going to, first of all, the next step is to come in with a little bit of quinacridone gold, not too runny. And I'm just going to drop that in at the base of the flowers here. And then after that I'm going to put in the stems. Okay, so we'll just put that in there because that's the way they tend to be. They have a bit of yellow there. Now I'm going to mix up some brown using the rose colour and the green colour. I'm going to make it a sort of soft brown, and the brown that we get, it will tone with the magnolias because it's made from the same colours as they are. So then we'll just, using the slightly smaller brush, just drop in the stems using broken lines, rather than, we don't want to use a solid line for this one. We do sometimes, but I think for this it'd be quite nice to keep the lines kind of broken and incomplete. You can indicate other little branches going off from place to place if you want. And don't forget this one up here. There we are. And then you can, if you want to make that a little bit darker, just add a little bit more green and a little bit more rose to your mix, and you get a darker brown. And then you can just drop in along the edge. Let's make that a bit more green. Brown a bit darker altogether. Along the edge, just drop in a little bit more colour, then you get a blended effect, which can be quite nice. And as the paint dries, that will stand out more. So you can come back to that a bit later with a bit more. The other thing that you can do to make it more interesting is you can just touch the edges with a wet brush and just allow the the paint to bleed a little bit, and you can just play with that. And then you can always come back in later and sharpen that up if you want to. So that's that step. And then I think I'll go back to my big brush again, and I'm going to just check those are dry. Yes, I'm just going to put in some more layers of paint here to emphasize the shapes of the magnolias, the petals. There's my coffee. Okay, so just a few like that. And where you go over it twice very lightly like that, it does start to emphasize the colour and the shape. It's always a bit darker where you've got two layers, of course. So just doing this very loosely. It's not entirely random, because you are thinking, as you do this, you're thinking about where you're going to put the strokes and how you're going to do them, and probably best to kind of curve them a little bit. And then we might want to pick up a little bit of slightly darker, but plenty of potter's pink rather than the strong quinacridone colour, and just drop a few touches in so that can bleed and give you some more shadowy effects near the base of the flowers. And then we might go back to our small brush and pick up some more brown, that is to say mix some more green with some more rose, and then just strengthen the branch there a little bit. And don't forget again to touch the edges if you want to blur it a bit. And if you feel that it's getting a little bit too dark in some places, you can always just dab it out a little bit. And probably going to want to let that dry again for a little while, and then we'll come back and see how that's doing. Now there's a few things you can do to these flowers if you want to before you finish with them. And one thing is you can put in some of the veins in the leaves using a watercolor pencil, and simply all you would do is just go into the leaf and just draw very light lines coming out to indicate the veins on the petals. And so that's one thing that you could do. You could do quite a lot of that if you wanted to. You can also draw in more structured detail if you want to actually put the more structure into the flowers. And you can use these pencils for emphasizing areas where you might want to do some shadow, a little bit of shadow, and not necessarily do it with paint, because these pencils are more controllable. So it depends what kind of style you want to achieve. But I'm just giving you some ideas for the purposes of demonstration here. This isn't a work of art, it's an instruction video. And then you can soften the lines up if you want. And then that will give you some extra control over what's happening in your painting. Depends on your personality really, how you want to go about doing this. You can also, if you feel that the yellow bits are a little bit too light, you can come back in with a little bit more yellow and just strengthen those up a little bit with a spot or two. And when that's dry, which it isn't yet, I can do another layer, or I can leave it the way it is. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm going to finish it off with some spatter, because I think that often just lifts a painting a little bit. So I'm going to take a large brush, this is a 14, and first of all I'm going to start with the potter's pink again, and I'm just going to literally drop some splashes in especially around the area in the middle, like where the stems are. And then I'm going to pick up some greenish brown, that is to say the same colour that I mixed for the stems, and we'll pop a few of those in, just a few. And then I, myself personally, always quite like to just break some of those up. It's my particular tendency is to put the splashes on and then just break them up a little bit so that they relax. And I personally really like that effect. I don't know if it reminds me of the rain or something, I don't know, but I quite like that. And then I might come back in afterwards with something else to sharpen it up. You could add to this with pen and ink if you wanted to give it more structure, or you could just stick with the very light effect. And the thing is, you do need to let it dry before you decide whether or not you actually are happy with what you've done. And but at this point, like I am here, you could say, oh, I think I need to put another indication of a petal in there. It's crying out for that. So Magnolia, loose, very loose, basically for learning how to use light colours, veils of painting, wet in wet, and a limited restricted palette. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will let you get on with your day now. I hope you have fun practicing that one. Give me a like and subscribe and turn notifications on. We put a video up every day, and we're trying to make it more regular, so we're hoping to make them go up around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So just as a reminder, here's my original sketch, which you should start off with. And then we have the painting here, which is still an experimental work, not dry. I'm going to dry it now, and I'll put it on the end of the video for you to see. So bye bye everybody for now. Bye bye, bye bye.